Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you at the Digital Middle Eastern FP&A Circle. My name is Olga Rudakova. I'm a data storytelling trainer, dashboard design consultant, and FP&A trends ambassador. I'm happy to facilitate this event for you tonight, especially because this topic is very dear to my heart. We are going to speak about mastering the art and science of FP&A storytelling. This topic is quite popular within our FP&A community, and it has attracted over 450 registrations from 57 different countries. If you are wondering what were the topics of previous events in our circle, here is a list. And if you are interested in watching them, digital meetings are available in format of recording. What we can expect tonight. Our today's agenda includes various aspects of FP&A storytelling. We'll start with answering some key questions: why, how, and when. We'll go through several elements of the story, starting with presentation called Story Goes First. Then we move on to the power of data in FP&A. Then we'll discuss influencing different types of audiences with FP&A storytelling. We'll speak about the importance of technology, and obviously we'll have conclusions, recommendations, and Q&A session. Now it is time to introduce our speakers for the evening. Please join me here on the webcam, and it is my pleasure introduction. I'll start with you, Marcus. Our first speaker for the evening will be Marcus Pinter, Global Project Lead. Marcus has over 20 years of international experience. Marcus, we are happy to have you with us.
Thank you for having me tonight. Thank you very much.
Let me move on to introducing our second speaker. It will be Peter. Peter is a global head of data, reporting, and analytics at Takeda Business Solutions. Peter, join us here on the camera, and meanwhile, I can tell that Peter has over 15 years of experience in FMCG, retail, and pharmaceutical. Peter, thank you so much for joining tonight.
Happy to be here, Olga. Hi, everyone.
Next speaker for the evening will be Ram Bala. Ram is a CFO for Middle East and Africa at Barclays. Ram has 22 years of progressively senior experience working in retail, corporate, and investment banks. Ram, thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And the last speaker for the evening will be Arun Sadagopan. Arun is a regional sales director at Jedox. Arun has experience in enterprise performance management and business intelligence space for over. Arun, thank you for joining tonight.
Thank you, Olga. Pleasure to be here.
And I'm very happy to have you all at our panel. Meanwhile, let me introduce FP&A Trends Group very briefly to our audience. We are not only International FP&A Board, which is, by the way, presented in 16 different countries, but we are also FP&A Insights digital community with multiple resources you can access online. Besides that, we provide some educational research and consulting resources as well. So if you know only one aspect of FP&A Trends Group, it's certainly worth discovering the rest. Meanwhile, what we can expect tonight? We are having 90 minutes webinar. You will participate in 4 interactive polls, multiple choice questions. You will hear the result right away. Besides that, we'll have Q&A sessions. So if you have questions to our participants, you can start asking them right now through questions box. Presentation of the event will be is already available in handouts section, and it will be sent to you along with a recording within 2 days after the meeting. One more thing, when we finish, there will be very brief survey after the session. So please Don't ignore it. Fill in the survey. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Let me thank our sponsor for the evening. It is Jedox, Modern Enterprise Management. And now it is time to start the session. I want to talk to you tonight about data storytelling, FP&A storytelling, and indeed there are plenty of opportunities to tell stories in finance. We communicate insights on daily basis, and each such communication presents opportunity for a story. But do we really need to tell a story every time? As Marcus will certainly mention in his presentation, when there are too many stories, become boring. Let's see when it's worth telling a story. And Brand Dykes, in his book, Effective Data Storytelling, clearly describes when it's a good time for a story. Let's first look at the insight type. You can classify all the insights on the scale from very simple, easy to very hard. So when it's easy, it's agreeable, it's conventional, it's expected, it's something we already know. Or it is hard, that's unpleasant, disruptive, unexpected, complex. So sometimes insights are difficult to digest. Insights also value in their potential, also vary in their potential value. Can be low, very high potential value. So when there is a highly valuable insight and it's hard to digest, that's when persuasive power of a story comes into the game. But wait, persuasive power. How do we make sure that our stories are indeed persuasive? That's where Aristotle's modes of persuasion come into the game. Today we are going to speak about modes of persuasion, elements of the story that help us convince our audience. You certainly know logos, pathos, and ethos. Logical appeal, emotional appeal, credibility of the speaker. We are adding one more tonight. We are going to speak about timeliness of our stories. Let's see what our speakers have to say in relation to these topics and beyond. Our first speaker for the evening will be Marcus Pinter with his presentation, Story Go. Marcus, please join me here on the camera and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. And also from my side, welcome to everyone on the webinar tonight. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my pleasure being here with you today. So what I would like to share with you today as the opening storyteller is my experience, my personal experience with storytelling over the years. As Olga mentioned, I am 3 decades basically a professional finance expert and have also went through storytelling in my company. So as the first box on the top left, number 1 says, someone explains, tells a story, narrates an experience. This is what I'm trying to do also with you today in the next couple of minutes. Mostly or ideally it is without slides. It's coming out of the memory, because the memory also stores only the really important key items of a story. Of course, sometimes like for trainings or webinars or for a business case, you also need slides. Storytelling is actually as old as history. As you know, Greeks, there are many Greek stories. The Romans used it on their forums. The Egyptians used that, and we are using it, coming to fore. We are using it when we are bringing our children to bed. And if the story is told well and the story is good, you see the emotions of our children. So a good story really addresses the emotions of the audience. Coming to number 3, and this is what to me the most important and sometimes my most frustrating item. Stories bring facts to life or make abstract things concrete. What do I mean? Of course, in finance, we very often either we explain business cases or we have to explain deviations in monthly reportings or yearly reportings and so on and so forth. And when the explanation is that it is in country A, B, C, or product A, B, C, that doesn't tell me the story, because I know that the deviation is somewhere in the countries, somewhere in our product range, but I need to understand what is the underlying reason, what caused this deviation. Is it a distributor is going bankrupt, or is shortage of supply in the market, and so on and so forth. This is what makes the deviation concrete and understandable also to top and senior management. And here I have a lot of frustrations, I have to say, because sometimes FP&As, they drill down into the systems and they list a couple of countries, a couple of products, but not explaining why this happened. So we will try to also mention later how we avoid this in the best case. So with that, on the next slide already, I will share with you disadvantages of using stories. Stories are great, as I mentioned already, and have been used for thousands of years, but there are also disadvantages. If you tell a story, it's usually the audience is passive and just listening. With that, there are also less active participation. So it's a one-way communication, and it's not interactive, which can make it boring if the story is not really exciting. And if it's too long, it can be very monotonous. And if it's too frequent, it's incredible. Stories are really something which is rare, unique, or specific to an event or incident which is currently going on. So how to overcome it? So first of all, a story to me should be always keep it simple and short. And the way how I personally address this issue is I use the rule of 3. You will see later, I will explain it. On this slide, you see also already the rule of 3. 3 disadvantages and 2 or 3 measures how to overcome it. I use the rule 80-20, which most of us use. So don't explain everything, explain the most important things, right? And last but not least, keep it simple and short, as I mentioned already. And use it infrequently. Too many stories are making the storyteller not really credible. That's is not what is in the nature of the human being, having for everything a story, for every presentation, in every coffee break, in every situation, a budget review or wherever, that you have a story at hand. So this makes it questionable in storytelling. With that, I'm already coming to my last slide. When does storytelling happening, or where can we make use for it? Of course, in particular, I would say, no, not in particular, but one-time events, major events impacting the whole unit, a country, a product range, like mergers, divestments, prunings, change in strategy, or restructuring. So, for example, my current company currently is going through a major restructuring. We are basically conducting a merger between 2 internal units, and these internal units were basically mirrored. So we had 2 general managers, 2 CFOs, 2 HR departments, 2 medical directors, and everything is double. And I had the experience already when in my company the global merger happened in 1996. I have the experience, and I shared the experience with my colleagues what's going to happen, how to discuss with the unions, how people selection will happen, and so on and so forth. So here you can share your experience, which in this case is already 25 years back, but it is exactly the same is happening again. And an ongoing and monthly reporting, and here is basically what I mentioned earlier. Very often I have the most frustration when I receive a report and then FP&A, or in my company called BPA, telling me, or a listing, giving me a list of countries or products where a deviation is shown in the system, but basically a drill down, but not explaining what happened to why these deviations happened. As I mentioned, it can be supply restrictions, it can be cash flow issues, and so on and so forth. Here, this is what has to come to the plate. And as I mentioned also already, focus on the main deviations, 80-20 rule. So mostly the 80% of all deviations are basically caused by 20% of underlying business reasons. So focus on the main deviations. However, number 3, never neglect minor deviations. They might wash out anyway, but if, and this is what one of the tasks in FP&A and BPA should have, he or she should realize if minor deviations over time, first of all, are they continuously, permanently, and are they growing? So this growing initial minor deviation could, of course, cause either a big opportunity in the future, which no one was expecting, or a big risk if it is a sales shortfall or a cost overspend in special projects. So the FP&A has to look out. How to do so? Because in our world, we have mostly strict deadlines. In the finance functions, we have deadlines when to report and so on and so forth. And actually, the underlying business reason should not be asked or should not be a surprise to the finance department, to the FP&A after the report or when the report is issued. An FP&A, in my understanding, must be a business partner, must be in contact with the business permanently. Already he or she, during the month, should understand what is going to happen. The only question mark what is the concrete number, how it finally impacted it. So this is what it is to me, being permanently together with the business, with the commercial teams, and understanding what's going on in the market. Yeah, with that, I'm already coming to my closing for this initial presentation. So very important how I approach it. The rule of 3. So I have three slides. The rule of 3. I have in most slides three items mentioned, and I explained to you the rule of 80 and 20, and keep it short and simple. I hope that my presentation was short and simple. I kept the rule of 3, and I hope I addressed 80% of your questions, or high-level questions, let's say that way, already with this first presentation. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a continuous great webinar. Olga.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcus. You are indeed a person who walks that talk. Exactly what you taught us, that's some rules that you follow yourself. And actually, I think that's time to involve our audience into our discussion. What I want to do now is I want to ask you first polling question that is closely related to Marcus's presentation. First question I want to ask you, my dear audience, is how does your organization approach finding a story in business data? Let's see, what do you do most often? Pick one answer that best describes your situation. We analyze data breakdowns to identify where exactly the issue is. So key is to locate the issue. Or maybe you talk to relevant stakeholders after you identify the issue. Another option is that you proactively consult with stakeholders to foresee issue, being in constant contact with the business throughout the period. And the last option I have here is that you use already driver-based monitoring tools to find root causes automatically. So let's see which option describes your situation the best way. Analyze data breakdowns and drill through, or you talk to relevant stakeholders after identifying the issue. You talk to your stakeholders before seeing the issue, foreseeing them, being proactive rather than reactive. Or you use driver-based tools to identify root causes automatically. Most of you have voted, so it's time for me to close the poll and share the results with you. What do we see here? We actually see quite interesting, almost even distribution. 35% majority talk to relevant stakeholders after identifying the issue, but another 23 talk to them proactively. 27% analyze data breakdowns to identify the issue, and very few already have driver-based tools in place. Marcus, let me ask you for your opinion. Are you surprised by the polling results?
No, not really. I'm really happy to see that the green bar is the biggest bar with 35%. Maybe it should be even more. As I mentioned, definitely I would like that my team is very close with the business, with the stakeholders, and does understand what's going on in the market, and that the concrete number is expected, and the number is expected, but the exact number is not a surprise anymore at the end of the day, right? So from that point of view, happy to see the number 2 is the biggest bar. Maybe it could be bigger.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you for your comment. And it's time for us to move on to a short discussion between all our panelists. So please join us here on the camera. And what I want to discuss with you all is a bit balancing question. In the realm of FP&A decision making, how do you strike a balance between making the right decision and making a timely decision? Quite difficult thing to balance. Petra, let me start with you here. How do you find a balance between right and timely decision?
Yeah, look, I think so. My answer is that you really need to understand what the decision is needed for and why you are making the decision. And I think the more you understand this and the more you understand the context, the clearer it will be where the right balance lies. I think it's hard to say like generally.
So no universal answer, but understanding the context might tell you, is it enough data already, or we need to dig more?
Exactly.
Clear. Let's move on to you, Ram. What do you think? How to find this right balance between right decision and timely decision?
I would actually try to split it slightly differently. You cannot always be making the right decision. So decisions can be right, they can be right, wrong, whatever, right? You make an inference and you take a decision. So you cannot have 100% of all data points at all points in time to make the exact decision. We as FP&A professionals have to strike the balance by taking a decision. That's what we're there for. We have experience, we have knowledge, we have to take a decision, but generally try to get as much data as possible. But timeliness is of high essence in our job. And I think our experience, our gut, or to go with is also very important. So we have to take a decision nonetheless. But yeah, any decision can be right or wrong, but it is better to take the decision than to wait for all the data to come together.
Thank you. Thank you for this opinion. Arun, what do you think? How can we find this balance?
Well, as a technology enthusiast, I would say that having a tool in place, which would help you to collect all the data in front of you so that you can make the right decision. So the tool will help you to bring in all the data that is required for you to make a decision, but it's at the end of the day, it's you who's actually making the decision. I would go with a bit of Ram as well as Peter. So with technology, you're covering the portion of having visibility across, but the decision is basically there is never a right decision. So it's more of making a decision, assessing what is the risk versus reward. So that's something which I would focus on.
Right, right. Thank you. And back to you, Marcus. Do you have anything to add? How to find this balance between right and timely?
Yeah. No, I'm a little bit like Arun and Ram said, there is no perfect or right decision. In my words, there is no perfect plan, no perfect business case. It will never be perfect because there are, to my knowledge over 30 years, you have to have strong assumptions to come to a decision-making point. You have to communicate these assumptions. You should do a risk assessment besides a financial assessment of the business case. And if you have enough time, maybe you do a base case, a worst case scenario. If you don't have time, you rely on the risk assessment and spend more time on the risk assessment. It really depends how much time you really have. But strong assumptions, risk assessment, and then make a decision.
Nice, nice. It's already a toolkit how we can actually deal with a problem. Thank you so much.
Free items. And free items.
You follow your own rules. Thank you for that, Marcus. And now it's time for us to move on to the second presentation of the evening. We are going to speak about emotional appeal of our stories. We I've discussed how logic is a key component, how actually finding the true root cause is important. Is it everything we need? Maybe sometimes it's completely the opposite situation when our feelings and something more than numbers mean the most. Now, I'll give the word to our second speaker, Peter Galik. Peter will be speaking about the power of data in FP&A storytelling. Peter, it is yours.
Thank you, Olga. And I want to start my session with a story from The Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy from Douglas Adams. I hope many of you know the novel. In this more than 40 years old story, the humankind wanted to build a supercomputer that is pictured here, this golden computer. Today we would call it artificial intelligence. Probably at the time they called it supercomputer. And the only reason to build that supercomputer was to ask it the meaning of life. If it can answer to the humans. They built a computer, they built a large model, they fed it with all the data they had in the humankind, and they asked the computer that was named Deep Thought about the meaning of life. And for those of you who know it, you also know the answer. The computer actually gave the answer. And the answer to the question of meaning of life was 42. And I start with this story because I think it demonstrates how much people trust data. I think generally most of the business leaders that we interact with and most of the colleagues in our companies, they somehow seek something in data. And I think often I have a feeling that many people think there is some sort of truth or some sort of meaning of life in data. Whereas we as FP&A professionals, we know that data hardly have a truth inside. Data is information. Data contain information. Data is like language. It can speak very nicely about things, or it can speak also very badly about things. It is information. It is no truth inside. I think that is going too far. Actually, doubling down on this, I wanted to show an example of companies that when I had a look at, all these companies' success was actually not based on data. When Apple went into the personal phone and launched iPhone in 2007, there was very little data to suggest that there was such a need for any such device. When Netflix went and started to invest billions of dollars into streaming and into creating content for streaming, when before they were actually a DVD company, there was little data to suggest this would be successful. Same for Tesla and electric cars, same for Airbnb and sharing economy. So sometimes, even though we like to be data-driven and it's very much of a trend and it increases our importance in the world, strong vision can be more important, or other things can be more important. It's not only data, it's not only information that is there to life. So what we are actually asked when we are asked to present data, when we are asked to search some sort of truth, what we are asked to do, I think that's the big question. That's the big question, and that is the point of my presentation. What I learned through my career is that we often spend far too much time on getting the right data and doing the right analysis and preparing the data in the right way, the information in the right way. And we don't spend enough time to identify why we actually do it. Why the business leader that gave us this task in which situation is he? What does he want? Why we do this? Where this is all going? So the point of my presentation and my ask is to you, invest time in finding what's the purpose of your work, why you do it, why you got this task. We are all experienced professionals. Our time is valuable. So why you are spending the time on these tasks? What's the purpose? What's the purpose? Are we really asked to perform a genuine analysis to find out a reason for something happening? Yes, fantastic, let's do the analysis. Or are we just like on the previous slide when I mentioned, just asked to provide, to help trust, to help build trust? So I think understanding the purpose is key. And I think very often it is counterintuitive. So please spend time on it. Ask questions. Show the business leaders that you care. You care about the company. You care about them as individuals. And you care about the situation in which we are. And I'm sure it will help you to identify whether you need to make a fast decision or you have time to do proper analysis. It will help you. Invest time in the beginning. Find out why you do all this work. And it is not only the purpose that I wanted to make a point on. This is a slide from our company, from Takeda, about values. And I think when we speak about data and people trusting data, we have a big responsibility. And if we are asked to provide data to prove something, to document something, to build trust, we need to act with integrity. If you are asked to provide data to support a direction you don't genuinely believe in, I would question. I would not do it. If I'm asked to lie with data, which of course I can, if I'm clever, I can provide data to any example, of course. I would not do it, and that is about integrity. So really two points to remember from my presentation. Invest time to understand the purpose of your work. I would say up to half of all the time of the task should be this. And act with integrity. Thank you. Olga, back to you.
Thank you, Peter, for bringing in elements of the story that certainly go beyond numbers and data. We spoke about vision, we spoke about emotions, we spoke about integrity. And the next question I want to ask our audience is exactly about emotional appeal of your business stories. So let me start the second polling question for the evening, which is actually relates to emotional appeal of your stories. What aspect of emotional appeal do organizations prioritize in FP&A storytelling? What is closest answer to your current situation? Creating a sense of urgency for decision making might be emotional. Ensuring emotional neutrality to stay objective in analysis. Eliciting empathy through own personal stories, or sharing stories of clients and employees behind the numbers. So really trying to to make these numbers alive. Let's see which of these elements is closest to your practice. Creating sense of urgency, ensuring emotional neutrality, eliciting empathy through your own personal stories, or sharing stories of clients and customers. Most of you have voted, but let me give you 1 more minute to finalize voting and we will see the results. Let me close this poll and share the results with all of you. We actually see quite interesting, less even distribution than in the first question. 47% of you, so almost half, try to ensure emotional neutrality to stay objective. Another 38% create sense of urgency for decision making. None of you is using personal stories to actually elicit empathy, but 15% share stories of clients and employees behind the numbers. Peter, let me ask you to comment briefly on this poll. Are you surprised by the results?
A little bit. I sort of understand where it is coming from. But I must say I'm a little surprised that the emotional neutrality comes first. I must say I'm a little surprised, yes.
I see that people want to stay objective and let the audience make their own conclusions. I understand the logic behind it, but indeed I am surprised as well. Thank you for this comment, and let's move on to our short discussion between all our participants related to the emotional appeal. And what I want to ask you is try to memorize an example where inclusion of emotional elements led to a more impactful story in your business life. And let me start with you, Ram, here. Can you recall any story where emotions helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a real favorite one here, right? And people of my generation will sort of relate to a company called Kodak, which is no more relevant today. But there was a time when there was something called a Kodak moment, and that was the perfect photo op, right? When you got the perfect photo, it is a Kodak moment. But now, what Kodak is known for is what I would call the new Kodak moment, a moment when a company is so dominating, so much of a leadership that it is synonymous with the word photography, no more exists. So I tend to use that example to tell people that when people moved from cameras such as Kodak to digital photography, they refused to see the writing on the wall. They refuse to see the red flags. They refuse to acknowledge that they could be pushed over. So I use this example a lot with businesses which refuse to move from their position of strength and not look at other opportunities. Very much to what Peter said also, to look, have a sort of a vision, look at something beyond this. This is not going to last. And that sort of a shake up really works, and it sort of gets people thinking, and then consider other possibilities, not take the new discussion already forward. Yeah, so that really works for me.
Thank you, Raman. It's a new take on topic Peter has opened about having vision and having strong emotions. Let's move on and ask you, Arun. Do you recall any story when including emotions helped you?
Well, I'm in sales, Volga, so every single sales happens through emotions. Um, but then if I look into some of the times, we do have a set of process, a sales process, which you typically follow, we knowing the buying patterns of our customers, right? Sometimes we come up with certain customers where, I mean, they don't check the box. It's the odds are completely against you. But then your intuition says that, you know what, let's go ahead and try it, give it a shot. And but we have won by some of the deals that we have went against the odds. The data was not supporting us, but still we pursued it, and we managed to win those things.
Nice. Thank you for this answer. And I am curious to hear you, Marcus. Do you recall any stories where emotions help you?
Yeah, very much. Actually, in 2008 or 7, when our company started centralizing the accounting departments, first inside the country we had basically 7 or 8 business units completely independent. Also accounting was in 7 to 8 business units. Then we centralized them in one country. Then we made some pilots above country, and today we have 5 centralized accounting departments worldwide. So of course that comes with restructuring and reduction of headcount. And I was relatively young CFO back then in that country, and it meant that we had to let go 7 people. And these 7 people were of course completely depressed and frustrated with tears in their eyes. And I was standing in front of them explaining that at this timeline, this and this will happen. This is the project we have to do. And they were emotionally completely affected. I was completely affected emotionally. I saw them, how sad and depressed they are. And I didn't really also had a good answer immediately on top of my tongue. So, but ultimately I told them, look guys, I will help all 7 of you to find a new job, if it's without my company, if it's within the company or whatever. And that gave them some peace of mind, and that helped them. And we conducted the project, we finished the project. And in these 3-4 months of this project, the 7 people who were impacted, they found new opportunities by themselves in new companies inside the company, or the 2 gentlemen went to the military service. So it turned out all good. I had no idea how I should approach it in that moment. And I was then emotionally, when I left the meeting and went home, and I said, oh God, what did I do? But yeah, ultimately it turned out very, very well. So project was successful.
Thank you for this story. And eventually these are kind of experiences we remember most.
Yeah.
Let me move back to you, Peter. You've already mentioned many examples where vision was more important than data in your stories, but maybe something from your personal business life related to emotions in a story. Can you give us an example?
Yes, absolutely. I would say general answer to this question would be, I mean, always. I think it's hard to find an example where adding emotional elements does not make the story better. So generally speaking, now I am working for Takeda for 7 years. That is a pharmaceutical company that is developing and selling medicines for rare diseases, so very serious diseases. So typically we would use patient stories. And recently, I have witnessed one super powerful one where it was actually our colleague who said that she joined Takeda because she wanted to work for a company that saved her child life. That I found very powerful.
That's indeed where business and personal life intersect and make the most powerful stories. Thank you guys for all of your examples, and it's time for us to move on to the second half of the evening. Let me use this moment to ask our audience to send questions to our participants. You can send them to Marcus and Peter, who already spoke. You can send them to Ram and Arun, who are just about to speak, but don't hesitate, send your questions. Meanwhile, let's move on to the third mode of persuasion. And we are going to speak about We're going to speak about credibility and about building this trust with all types of audiences. Now I'll give the word to Ram Bala with his presentation, Drive Organization Performance, Influence Your Audience with FP&A Storytelling. Ram, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Olga. I'll start with actually taking off from Peter, that you need to have a purpose when you're doing the storytelling. So that's very much an overarching theme. And then if you look at the thing as to how you structure your FP&A storytelling, it's better to have a structured approach. I would start by simplifying complex financial data. Data finally needs to be woven into the story. And if data is just the data that you see in an overarching way, it will not fit in the story. So you need to simplify data so that you can communicate the data sets to different audiences. Audience, they are the most critical people for the whole storytelling. Who is your audience? What are your drivers? What is it that drives them? What is this motivation? What is their role and what is their expertise? How do they stand in the organization and how will they drive the organization's goal? These are very critical things that we need to understand about our audience before we progress any further. When it comes to story narrative, we need to build a story which is compelling, of course, and one which sustains interest, because starting off with something but not reaching the purpose and delivering an output is not compelling and fulfilling narrative. We need to have a fulfilling narrative. Then once you know your audience, once you have your story in place, then you need to tailor your story. You need to make your story special to the people that you're talking to. Speak the language of your audience. Communicate to them in the words that they understand, in the with the terms that they understand, and that will be very, very relatable. And finally, you have to provide insights. You have to provide ideas, and the purpose should be delivered. There should be some real output coming out from all that you have done with the storytelling. Let's look at a particular banking example. And in a bank, this is a very, very serious example. There are multiple large banks all of them deliver billions in revenue and high profits, but delivering returns higher than the cost of capital is a challenge for most banks. Now, if just a simple goal is given, deliver return higher than cost of capital, how would we approach it as an FP&A person to drive the entire organization and actually deliver the goal? So some basic steps would be to simplify the financial data through going through all the 5 things that I've sort of put together here, looking at actually the cost of capital, looking at segments, looking at products, and looking at pricing within those segments. Then each segment and each product has a consumption of capital. And this consumption of capital, when sort of put against the pricing, tells you the returns that come through at a top level line for the product of the segment. Then you look at things like cost, impairment, things that take away from your revenue. Finally, you build a returns matrix. You have a board when you look at different divisions or different products and what returns that you have today. This could be the simplest way to tell you where you stand today. But yes, remember, we have to deliver returns higher than the cost of capital. So let's see who the audience is in the banking scenario. Who are we addressing? In a bank, especially, FP&A is a single function which speaks to multiple stakeholders. It could speak to people above the board. Above, when I say above, it means the board people. It could be business heads, it could be functional heads, and all sort of leaders. And then it could speak laterally. It could speak to other functional teams. They could be legal, they could be compliance, fin crime, so on and so forth. It could speak to risk teams. They could be credit risk, market risk, other risk teams. FP&A also has to communicate with the analytics teams. It has to communicate with teams who make products, which is innovation teams, communicate with the front line. It communicates with the sales teams, product teams, strategy teams, and the operational teams. So FP&A has multiple stakeholders and it's uniquely placed to address all of them. Now FP&A needs to play the question back for each stakeholder. What is their role? What is their expertise? What drives them? How are they going to deliver the organization's goal? What are their motivation? And then when we know all our stakeholders and we have answers to all the questions that we asked about the stakeholders, we need to speak in the language of the stakeholders. How do we tell the story in their language? And here's a very nice story. All of us would have heard this story in our grade school, right? Pretty much every one of us knows this story. The blind man and the elephant. All the blind men came across the same elephant, just that they addressed different aspects or they touched different parts of the elephant. So they all had unique experiences with the same animal and they all perceived it differently because somebody thought it was a rope, somebody thought it was a wall, somebody thought it was a fan, a spear, a snake, a tree, and so on and so forth. So what changed? It is the same thing, but perceptions are different. Similarly, all stakeholders are looking to deliver the same goal, but each one of the stakeholder needs to be addressed in the same way, like I said, in the way that they understand. The people who are working in the credit department could understand how they need to sanction. Somebody who is working in treasury will understand what cost of capital they can reduce. Somebody working in uh, optimization will understand how we can reduce RWA consumption, but each one of them is working to deliver the same goal for the organization. So tailor your story, tailor your communication, have the story, but tell different people things differently to deliver the same goal. Now is the final bit, the purpose. How do we make use of all that we have done through the storyboard? So I've just put here, we all know the famous BCG metrics. Let's say even for a return on capital, we come up with a BCG metrics. This is the ultimate delivery of purpose for the organization. Why is a particular business or a particular segment a dog? Why is it delivering very low on return and consuming and low on revenue? Why is it a dog? Why can it not improve both on revenues or at least move to a star directionally, at least delivering more on capital? What could we do to reduce capital consumption in this business? What could we do to reduce costs in this business? Why is a business very large and not delivering on returns? Why it is a cash cow? How can that business be a star? How do we look at actual RWA reduction for some businesses? How do we invest in a business which is a star, which is delivering very high return on capital and which has very high revenue contribution? How do we move everybody into the top bracket? So ultimately, the job of storytelling is to get everything together and sort of piece everything together. I'm sure if you follow the 4, 5, 6 steps that I laid out to start with, the answers will fall together. The pieces of the jigsaw will come together and we can solve the goal or the question that we had in the beginning. How do we generate a return better than the cost of capital? So it is about following steps very diligently and going through and addressing audiences differently, but delivering the same goal for the organization. So thank you. Like I said, yeah, it delivers the goal for the organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ram, for such a wonderful presentation. Now I'm actually thinking about how can I address different types of audiences in my organization. Let's move on and ask our audience how they approach the same topic. It's time for the third poll for tonight. And what I want to ask you is about how do finance business partners in your organization approach different audiences in FP&A storytelling? So there are several options I want to give to you. We show just the numbers and let them speak for themselves. Another option is we let analytical audiences reach their own conclusions. So actually let people analyze data themselves. We use financial jargon to engage knowledgeable audiences, or we adjust complexity and language to the audience's scale. So let's see how people approach it in practice. Choose the answer which is closest to what you currently have as a best practice in your organization. We show just the numbers and let them speak for themselves. We let analytical audiences reach their own conclusions. We use financial jargon to engage knowledgeable audience and show how smart we are. We adjust complexity and language to the audience scale. So most of you have already voted. So let me close this poll. And it looks like this question was easy and most of you agree that 91% adjust complexity and language to the audience scale. So you really work with your different types of audiences. Nevertheless, we have several other answers. 6% use financial language to engage knowledgeable audiences, and 2% let analytical audiences reach their own conclusions. Ram, let me ask you briefly to comment on the polling results. What do you think?
I think it's very heartening, right? So pretty much everybody is able to adjust what they communicate based on their audience, both the complexity and language. So very heartening to see, very absolutely what should be happening.
Indeed. So at least everyone acknowledges the need for that, and how well we do that obviously depends on our skill as well, but we all know that it's important to do. Let's move on to our third discussion for the evening. So please join me here on the camera. And now we want to speak about credibility. We often think about building credibility outwards. When we come to conferences like this one, we make sure that audiences trusts us, believes us, knows that we are in the field. But how do we approach building credibility within our organization as finance business partners or as finance professionals in general? So any tips to our audience how to build this credibility? And let me start with you, Arun. What do you think? How can we build credibility?
Well, this is where a tool would play a key role. In order to maintain a TOS, you have to be reliable, accurate information. The data are accurate, it's backed by data rather than any manipulation or any biases that is being applied. And being completely transparent in terms of the assumptions that has been used is one of the key things. And this is where a technology, a tool would play a role in order to ensure that all these things are maintained and every information that you see is actually credible and reliable.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And let me move on to you, Marcus. Any tips from your side how we can build our credibility?
Yeah, as the saying said, credibility or trust is built in a long time and lost in a moment. So I would say, of course, it is finance people or everyone. It doesn't matter in which company, in which function, in the family. You have to walk the talk. So what you once promised or have shared, you have to really execute or trying to execute. Not everything will be successful. But before you come to that, you have to listen to all the stakeholders. You have to be open for other opinions, open for other solutions. As humans, we are a little bit have tendencies. We are a little bit biased to a solution, to a side, to left or right. But we have to be open to listen to our stakeholders and also make use of their ideas. And I think Aaron also was mentioning it. Transparency is one of the key elements of these things. So again, I'm coming down to three items: walk the talk, listening, and be transparent.
Thank you so much for that. And actually, listening is a way to credibility. That's amazing. That's an amazing piece of advice. Thank you for that. Let's move on to you, Peter. Any piece of advice from your side?
Yeah, just a short thought from my side. My advice is to connect with the business, is to connect with the business leaders, show them that you care. I think they all trust your expertise, but show them that you are vested, you care, would be my advice to build that also.
Nice. Thank you. And again, emotional angle here. And back to you, Ram. I know that you have already answered this question through your presentation, but if you want to give one piece of advice in one sentence.
Just the same thing, reinforcing by speaking the language of the audience, supporting them by sort of reinforcing their thoughts, because they're all knowledgeable people. So if you're able to connect with them, sort of evidence to them what you're saying is what sort of resonates with them, and then you build on your story. First, talk to them, connect, land a few key messages which they agree with, and then take your story forward. So that I think is very key.
Thank you for all these pieces of advice. And we are moving on to the last presentation of the evening, and the last element of the modes of persuasion in our storytelling. We are speaking about Kairos, having data at our hands in time, thanks to modern technology, to make our decisions and to tell our stories. Now, Arun Sadagopan will be speaking about the importance of technology in leveraging FP&A storytelling. Arun, it is yours.
Thank you, Olga. Hello, everyone. Everyone loves a good story, but not everyone is a good storyteller. If you look at it, you need skill to analyze data. Similarly, you need skill even to be a storyteller. In fact, not just only to be a storyteller, but also to even come up with a story requires a skill. As a regional director for Jedox, I meet a lot of finance professionals day in and day out. And I would like to recall one such interaction that I had with my dear friend, Mr. Mohammed Al Rubi. So he shared how the storytelling actually helped him in convincing his management in terms of the forecast that he submitted during his role as an FP&A manager working for Energizer, which is into battery making business in Egypt. So he has been, as an FP&A manager, he has been tasked to provide the latest estimates. And his estimate included 4 months of actuals, and it has 8 months of forecast. Now, one thing which is particular about his estimate was that the 4-month actuals was significantly higher compared to his average sales run rate that he typically have. Whereas his forecast is looking exactly like the average sales run rate that he has. If he had shown this to his regional management without telling the story why the actuals are significantly higher, the regional management would not be able to understand, and they might even put pressure on the country managers to increase their upsides or even increase their target. So what he did was he collaborated with other departments. He collaborated with sales. He collaborated with a supply chain department to understand the rationale behind why the actuals are higher than the normal. So he was able to find out that since Energizer is actually in the business of making batteries, this was happening on the first 4 months, which is the winter time in Egypt. So these batteries was used to light up the heater, and which the demand rose for the heaters, which in turn the demand rose for the batteries, and that was the reason why there was a huge amount of the actual numbers which is coming in. So when he understood it, then he became quite confident in terms of explaining to his management. Now, that's the reasons why, if you look at the story, that's the reason why an FP&A should embrace storytelling. First and foremost is to collaborate with other departments, ensuring that the same message has been passed from finance, or be it sales or IT or procurement or supply chain. So everywhere the same vocabulary is used, the same story has been used, and to have much more engaging interactions and more memorable data that you look at, not just the financial KPIs, but also the operational KPIs, having it in a bit of a dashboard, giving an overall view in terms of the health of the company. Now, if you have all these data, then obviously the decision-making process is going to be much more accurate in terms of what they need to call. You can look at how your operations is getting impacted. Now, if we talk about how technology would help you in terms of being a storyteller, which is explained in my next slide, is technology is one of the greatest enabler. And we have seen a lot of advancement in terms of technologies. It's just not only to remove you out of your mundane task that you typically do of collecting data from different source systems of your operation systems, and then to build your report or build your analysis. Instead, now we have AIs, which is working in terms of collecting these data completely automated for you. It can identify the outliers that is there, so which would eradicate the complete bias that you might have, or the conscious or unconscious bias that you might have, which would help you to be much more accurate in terms of your decision making. And most of the time, what I have personally seen in the interactions that I had is that all the FP&A teams, they spend more time in terms of collecting the data rather than analyzing the data. So with the system in place, this is going to be completely eradicated for you. So all the data collection part, all the cleaning part would be done by the system. So you can actually spend more time in actually analyzing the data, making the right decisions for you. Now, if you look at how an organization, if you would like to adapt to the storytelling, which is explained in my next slide, is that the first and foremost is that in order to be a good storyteller, you need to have structured information, meaning you need to have visibility not only on your Office of Finance, but also in terms of your operations. So that's the first and foremost. The tool should be in a position to bring in data from different source systems, irrespective of the volume of the data. And then it would help you to find out all the outliers that is there within the data. Now, once you have brought in the data in a structured format, now you need to make a decision. What story would you like to tell? What story would you like to tell to your audience if they look at it? So that's the first one. So you can decide, for example, if you talk about sales, then you can build in a dashboard which talks about your pipeline generation, which talks about your customer behaviors. It can talk about your orders. It can talk about your closed deals. So it depends on the story. You structure the data in a single format. So in which that just by glancing at it, that people would know what is how your organization is performing. So there is a saying that a good picture worth more than 1,000 words. So having it in a structured way based on the story that your audience would like to see is much more important. Now, I can never complete my presentation, especially talking about AI, if I'm not using the chat GPT. Chat GPT is a new buzzword, which now everyone is using chat GPT, and everyone, what it has done is it has democratized the AI to everyone. Everyone is a programmer. Everyone knows how to use it because of the intuitiveness that is there. Now, instead of you using that only to respond to emails, there are tools which can integrate chat GPT for you, especially for your FP&A. Now, imagine if the tool is doing that, what it does is that it's not only about capturing the huge volumes of data and then giving the outliers, but rather it can also help you to build the narration for it. It can actually write the description for you about the story behind the data. It's completely done within the chat GPT. The use cases, especially in the Office of Finance, is huge, not just for the Office of Finance, but for other departments as well, to have a chat GPT in place. For example, with finance, we talk about the system itself is providing you the context about your management reporting. It can, we are talking about huge amount of data. So we're talking about looking at the trends, and it can suggest you some recommendations, what corrective actions that you would like to do. So it's all completely system driven. And not just for the Office of Finance. If you look at from a sales perspective, it can talk about your description based on your customer behaviors. It can derive the patterns based on that. In HRs, it can do more of a hiring or retention policies or employee engagements. It's completely, the system will advise you. And in terms of ESG, we are talking about not just the maintaining the compliance to be part of the ESG certification. We're also talking about how to save, how to create a new investment opportunities, or how to create a bit of a savings, which you can get rebates based on being rated in terms of a highest ESG. So the use case of ChatGPT in the Office of Finance would not only help you to bring in the data, but also to describe. So the technology has been greatly advanced. Just to summarize my presentation, that now we are talking about the system itself will helping you to build the story itself. So that's the end of my presentation. So over to you, Olga.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for giving all these practical examples, how technology can improve accuracy, how it can improve speed, how actually it can perform many of the tasks for us. That's something I'll certainly elaborate on in our mini discussion. But meanwhile, let me ask our audience the remaining polling question, which actually is related to the speed of insights delivery. So question goes like that. What are your plans to improve the timing of data insights delivery in the organization? We have no plans to improve it, so actually we are happy with things as they are. We have planned to align the insights delivery with decision making, making sure that stories are being told in the right moment of time. We are planning to implement real-time data reporting and monitoring systems to make sure exactly this accuracy and speed to be achieved, or we already have these new tools in place. So these are 4 options we have. How can we make sure that we receive insights when we need to make decisions? We have no plans to improve that. We plan to align this timing with decision making, or we are planning to implement real-time reporting and monitoring systems, or we already have those modern tools in place. Majority of you have already voted, so I will close this poll. I will share results with you. So let us see how you have voted. Majority of you, 53%, have stated that implementing real-time data reporting and monitoring, that's what you plan. 34% plan to align this insights delivery with decision-making moments, and 8% have already new tools in place, and remaining 5% don't plan to make any improvements. What do you think? Are you surprised by the polling results?
No, not really, Olga. So if I can, I completely agree that implementing a real-time data reporting would actually help in terms of the timing of the data. And I also understand the second one, which is mostly in terms of aligning it with the delivery, is also much more important.
Thank you. Thank you for this comment, and I'm glad that people are going to the most robust solution possible. And now let's elaborate a bit on the automation. You have touched it very nicely, Aaron, in your presentation, and that's what I want to discuss with the rest of the panelists as well. It's a bit of philosophical question here, but with the advancements in technology and the rise of automation, do you believe it is possible to automate the process of storytelling in FP&A? And let me start with you, Marcus, here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely what Arun was mentioning, ChatGPT, as we all see now almost on a daily basis, comes up with new fields where it can help. And Arun also mentioned that ChatGPT can at least support in the storytelling. However, I believe that AI cannot be alone. So it must be complemented by emotional intelligence, meaning by human beings. So we will be always there around, and we will have to do the narrative. And with our emotions, we will also be the credible storyteller to the stakeholders, to the audience. So I think it will go hand in hand. AI, ChatGPT will become better and better and better over the years. It's already great, but we learn there is still some creepy stories coming out of ChatGPT sometimes, and this is why we still need the humans for the eternity. We will not go away.
Thank you for this answer. It's very reassuring. Let me move to you, Peter. What do you think? Can storytelling in FP&A be automated?
I think largely yes. The thing that you cannot automate is the emotional part.
That's a good point, valid point. Ram, what do you think? Can we automate storytelling in FP&A?
Of course, with what Arun is saying, it looks like to the large, except for the last mile, technology is going to get us there. But again, like I said, and I'm stressing again, it is how you tell your story to your audience. How do you connect them to the story? That emotional part, that last mile, is what will be us, which will be the FP&A professionals. If also another thing, all of this technology can get us only so much, right? If it is going to take away all the work behind the scenes, it absolutely frees up the individuals to become better FP&A partners. And that's where storytelling will become more stronger, will become aligned with the business, and actually use all of the data sets coming through. And we'll have more timely decisions. We had a question in the poll previously, right? So will we be able to take timely decisions? Now, if these decisions are going to be aided with all sorts of information available almost to the last degree, you're going to take better decisions. You're going to be able to work with the business better. So you use the technology to aid your work. We just need to leverage it. That's all.
Right. Arun, back to you. You have answered the question through your presentation, but I want to give you this opportunity to react to comments of your fellow panelists. How do you react to this emotional element not being automated?
Well, at the technology where it stands currently, it doesn't have the emotional element aspect of it. But with the advancements that we have seen, which is happening over the span of years, is humongous. So I would not be surprised that there would be a time in which that the decision making resides with humans, where the remaining part would be done completely within the system. So that's at least that we hold the decision making process with this.
Right. Thank you so much for all these answers. And it actually brings us to the last bit of the webinar tonight. We are going to answer questions we have received from our audience. Dear participants, if you still have questions, still ask them. Maybe we will have time to answer them as well, or we'll send them to our participants in writing. Meanwhile, let me ask you some of the questions we have here, and I'll start with you, Ram. One question related to your presentation. How do you approach practically simplifying complex data insights in FP&A storytelling without sacrificing accuracy? So how do you simplify without sacrificing accuracy?
So we're talking about simplifying without sacrificing accuracy, if I heard you right?
Yes, yes.
Simplifying means to be able to bring the wider goal or the wider data set to make sense to the audience. Simplify doesn't mean that you break down a huge data set to the micro level. Simplify would mean different things at different levels. So you're not sacrificing accuracy at any point in time. With all the technology tools that we have, we are going to be able to slice and dice data the way we want it. To simplify complex data means to make it palatable, to make it something that can be consumed by every member of the audience that we are seeking to address. And I think with technology support, accuracy is not lost at all. It is our own interpretation of what the data is saying and how we need to communicate with differently with different individuals, which we need to sort of build up on. I don't think accuracy will be lost in this process.
Right, right. Thank you for that. That was certainly a concern here. Another question addressed to Arun. It's about how can we effectively integrate data storytelling in our existing FP&A processes and workflows. So it's connected to tools, but not exactly. So it's a bit broader question related to processes and workflows. What do you think? How can you advise a bit on how to integrate storytelling in our FP&A processes?
Well, it depends. It depends on what story would you like to tell. So it's more of the tools would help you to bring in all the data that is required for you, and in which that you can build. And with the integration with ChatGPT, it is also giving you the narration of it, the description of it, and it's more of what story that you would like to tell. Based on this, you actually build it.
Great, great. So actually tools can do part of the job for you, certainly the most boring part when bringing data together, and that allows you to build your own narrative or actually use some aid from ChatGPT as well on the way. Okay, let's move on, and I have a question to Peter here. Because you actually are quite experienced in reporting in wide areas. So the question is, what are the common challenges or pitfalls when implementing data storytelling in FP&A team? So what are common challenges, and maybe if you can help, how we can overcome them as well?
I think one of the common challenges is that we tend to on the data side, people tend to use sort of like their own data, and I think that duplicates duplicates data modeling, duplicates reporting, duplicates creation of the various narratives. So what I think is where we are going as big companies, as the world, is that big part of the data modeling we would have more as a common base for us to use, which doesn't mean two different people cannot tell the story in a different way, but at least we do refer to a data set and to a data model that prevents these, oh, I don't think this is the right numbers, I don't recognize your numbers kind of a problem, which I think is just an unnecessary, a completely unnecessary problem that I think we still have.
Right, right, indeed. It feels like the biggest challenge here still different numbers, still different starting points for the storytelling. I actually have one question to you, Marcus, as well, and it relates to some successful examples of implementing storytelling initiatives in finance. So can you give examples of some changes in the team, how they approach communication, how they started using storytelling from your practice?
That's an interesting question. Because storytelling to me is also a lot of experience, and you have to get used to it. What I'm trying to do when, as a CFO, trying to really challenge my teams, tell me understanding what is happening in the business, call the business, as I mentioned earlier. You should know actually before the concrete and precise and accurate number is available, what happened, right? And then tell me that. This is something which, and in a multinational company like ours, The teams are changing permanently. Every 3-4 years we have new teams and new colleagues. So it is an ongoing process. I don't have any milestone where I say, okay, in 2018 we achieved that and that and that and that. It's a continuous learning for myself, for the juniors, and for even experienced people. For me, storytelling is all about experience, and in the future also automated ones when we look at what ChatGPT might contribute to that one. So I don't have really clear key elements or success milestones where storytelling established its. And I don't know whether I mentioned, in our company, we introduced storytelling as training probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's not something which is every year available, but every other year or every 3 years, we have a package where we offer to interested community to learn about storytelling, what we did a little bit today, right?
Thank you so much for this answer, Marcus, and especially because it makes a nice bridge to the last question I want to ask all of you tonight. It's bridge to our skill set. You've mentioned that storytelling is continuous learning, continuous process, and it's a lot about experience. So what I want to ask all of you is, what are the skills complementary to data storytelling our financial teams need to be successful in this, to be successful in storytelling communication? And I'll start with you, Peter, here. So what do you think? What are the skills?
Yeah, sorry. What are
Absolutely. What are the skills, except for data storytelling, our FP&A teams need to be successful, to actually manage storytelling? What are the complementary skills we need?
I would say empathy. And I would say business acumen, if we can call it a skill. I would say these two are the ones that I think are the critical success factors.
Yeah, and it's very nicely connects to Marcus's presentation as well. You cannot tell your business story without understanding your business.
And without understanding to who you are telling to, right? Which was
Exactly, that relates to Ram's presentation about connecting to different audiences. And let's give the words to you, Ram. What do you think? What are the skills we need in addition to data storytelling?
See, data storytelling is one bit, but I think through the theme coming across from all our presentations is this, right? There's lots to be communicated. I think the essential skill of communication itself is very weak in multiple FP&A professions that I've seen. People are very good at doing the analysis bit and getting things to the final bit, but when it comes to communicating the story or actually telling people things in their own language, I think the skill to step up is very, very significant. It's actually a big gap, and people don't tend to realize. They tend to think that the numbers are there, the answers are there in the numbers, but communicating, speaking it out, talking to people and understanding the business and speaking to them in their language is a big gap that I see. And that is something that people would do well to pick up on. Now, more so, given what Arun says, that technology will get to the last mile. If finance professionals need to be relevant, FP&A professionals need to be relevant, they should be very much one with the business, understand the business, and like Marcus said, maybe need to anticipate the problems even before they happen because they have so much of information already available. So communicating and explaining to people in their own language is something that we need to pick up on.
Thank you so much. It's really an answer that connects bits all together from the whole webinar. Let me give the word to you, Arun. What do you think? What are other skills, except for data storytelling, we need to be successful?
Well, I would stand with knowing the business. And the skill is actually something, I mean, you can't master it in one go. It's something which you get better over the time. And with the tools that is coming up, and it is helping you to do it, so you can speed up the art of storytelling itself. You can develop the skill quite fast. But knowing business is something, knowing what's important for you, what are the drivers that is affecting your business is something that you need to know.
Thank you so much for that. And back to you, Marcus. What are the skills in addition to data storytelling that we need?
Yeah, I basically can only repeat what all my colleagues said. I think understanding the business or business acumen, as Pedro was mentioning it, is extremely important. If you don't understand the business, you cannot understand the story which is behind it and cannot communicate it to the right audience. You have to be also a little bit courageous, I would say, because the storytelling might give something which might not be nice in communicating to every stakeholder. There might be stakeholders who might be affected by that story and should have some consequences on it. So there's some courage is needed, and emotional intelligence, how to communicate eventually to the right stakeholders. So all what my colleagues already said, nothing which I have really to add to this one.
Thank you so much for this comprehensive summary, and it actually brings us to the end of Q&A session. I see that many more questions are coming in. We'll try to answer some of them in writing, but now it's already time to wrap up. So let me invite all of you to our upcoming events, what we can actually wait for. The FP&A Trends webinar on 21st of June about digitized FP&A business partnering, how technology can support it. And another event still in June 28th, Unleashing the Power of FP&A Change Management for Analytical Transformations. So you're certainly invited to both of them. I'm happy to thank our sponsor for the evening. It's Jedox, Modern Enterprise Performance Management. And what I want to share with you is how you can connect to us, to FP&A Trends Global Community. There are many ways to do that through LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, to choose the channel that works the best. Right after I finish this webinar, there will be a very short questionnaire for you to fill in. Please do so. Your feedback is very important for us. Thank you so much for everyone who has joined the live session. Thank you to all our panelists for being here, for sharing your stories, for answering our questions. Thanks you again for coming tonight. Have a nice day. Have a nice rest of the week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.